My boyfriend of 9 years, Liam, fell head over heels for some other woman during a business trip. He actually said, "We need to break up. I've found my soulmate, my muse. If you met her, you'd understand." I just chuckled softly, "Fine. Let's call it quits." The day we split, I turned around and said yes to another guy's proposal. Liam's secret Instagram account posted a video. It showed him, arms wrapped around a woman, leaping off a bungee jumping platform, their screams a mix of terror and exhilaration. Watching it, I felt strangely calm. Like always, I texted Liam that night. We exchanged a few "hey, how's it going" messages before saying goodnight. I didn't know when Liam got back from his trip. He just called, "Can I pick you up after work? We need to talk." Liam took me to a trendy bistro. He sat across from me, quiet, his phone practically glued to his hand. Throughout dinner, it buzzed with notifications. Each time he glanced at it, his eyes crinkled, a little smile playing on his lips. Finally, after we finished, he spoke. "So, tonight, consider this our last supper together." I took my time, dabbing at my mouth with my napkin. He continued, "I'm in love with someone else. She's everything I've ever imagined in a woman. She's my muse, my inspiration. If you met her, you would get it." I looked up at him, a faint smile on my face. "Okay, then we're done." His face went slack with shock. He finally caught up and a smile bloomed on his face. "I mean, we were together for 9 years. You have to want something, right? Name it, and I'll do it." I just laughed lightly, "No need." I stood up, grabbed my purse and said, "Well, if there's nothing else, I'm gonna head out." I'd been dating Liam since I was 20. 9 years later, I was getting pretty anxious about being an unmarried woman in her late 20s. It reached a boiling point earlier this year. I'd pressured Liam about getting married multiple times. It always devolved into fights and then icy silences. The longest time was over a month. It started on Valentine's Day and ended on June the 25th, when I gave him a gift for his birthday and caved, apologizing. I think that's when my feelings for him started to cool. The day I agreed to break up with Liam, I called my high school buddy, Mark Harrison, as soon as I got home. I said, "Remember last year when my mom was in the hospital? You said if I was still single at 35, you'd marry me? Were you joking or what?" Mark was silent for a beat. "What's going on?" I told him, flat and even, "Liam and I are officially over. If you don't mind, I'd like to take you up on that offer, early." He asked, "Where are you right now? Send me your address." So, I did. He texted back, "I'm on my way." I waited 3 hours, but Mark didn't show. I tried texting him, but no reply. I called, and it went straight to voicemail. Looks like my marriage plan was a bust. Not that I blamed him. Truth was, I wanted to get married, but it wasn't necessarily because I was in love with him. There were other reasons. I was finally asleep when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Mark, sweaty and out of breath, standing on my porch. He clutched a bunch of bright red roses and he apologized. "I'm so sorry. A car crash victim came in. They needed emergency surgery. It was crazy, I didn't have a second to text you." I just smiled and said I understood. And then he did it. He got down on one knee, pulling out a ring. "Sarah, will you marry me?" Last year, my mom was diagnosed with early-stage lung cancer. Liam was on another one of his business trips, and I felt so lost. So, I posted on our high school alumni group, "Anyone know anyone at University Hospital?" Mark, whom I hadn't spoken to in ages, replied almost immediately, "I'm a doctor at university. What's up? Add me on WhatsApp and tell me more." Mark ended up connecting me with a specialist. My mom had surgery by the end of the year and is recovering well. Whenever he wasn't on shift, Mark visited her, and we started hanging out again. One time we were sitting in the hospital hallway talking about Liam. He asked, "You guys have been together a long time, right? I don't think I've ever seen him come visit your mom. I was already losing faith in Liam. I tried to defend him. He wanted to be here, but his company sent him on this huge project. He can't leave until it's done. Mark nodded slowly. Your mom's been through so much. She's told me several times she wants you to get married, settle down, and have grandkids. His words hit a nerve. I'd been trying to hide it, but my eyes welled up with tears. After a long pause, I sniffled and whispered, I want to get married, but he doesn't. Mark frowned. He changed the topic. He smiled and said, don't worry about it, you'll get married someday. If he doesn't pop the question by the time you're 35, you can come find me. I'll marry you. That goofy line made me laugh for the first time in days. I said yes to Mark's proposal. I think he was afraid I'd change my mind. The very next day, we were at City Hall getting our marriage license. After we left, he dragged me over to take selfies with our licenses in front of the building. He looked at me and said, you're my wife now. On the way home, Mark was driving, and I was scrolling on my phone when I saw Liam's latest post. He wrote, my muse. The photo was of him and that girl, holding hands and gazing lovingly at each other. I instantly recognized her as the same woman from the bungee jumping video. I scanned the comments. Liam had a bunch of mutual friends asking about me. You and Sarah broke up? Wait, isn't Sarah your girlfriend? Sarah was talking about planning your wedding earlier this year, right? Liam replied to his post with a canned response, Sarah and I broke up a long time ago. Please don't ask about irrelevant people anymore. My girl doesn't like it. I actually burst out laughing. We broke up yesterday, but according to him, we were done a long time ago. Mark glanced over, what's so funny? I told him I just saw a guy on social media. He's exhibiting the classic signs of early onset dementia. Mark chuckled, well, someone should tell him to get that checked out. If he needs your hubby's help, just say the word. I laughed, too late, I already blocked him. After marrying Mark, I moved into his place. We were grown-ups, husband and wife, so even though it was a whirlwind, I was fine with it. About a month later, Mark and I were at the grocery store. Of course, who did we run into but Liam and his muse? Liam was strolling along, pushing a cart, while the girl was staring at the yogurt aisle. Liam walked right up to me and said with a fake smile, small world. I looked at the stuff in his cart. Ramon, cookies, candy. The girl looked like she was barely out of high school. She probably liked that stuff. I used to, but Liam always grabbed those snacks and secretly put them back on the shelves. When I asked why, he'd say, that's all junk food. It's for your own good. Before I could even respond, Mark grabbed a bag of Flamin' Hot Cheetos off the shelf and asked me, remember those? You used to eat these all the time in high school. You still like them? My eyes lit up, yeah. Let's get a few bags of different flavors, and those pickled chicken feet too. Mark smiled and headed off, stocking the cart with every kind of spicy snack he could find. Liam was frowning now, your boyfriend? I shrugged, no, he's my. I didn't get to finish. Liam smirked. Oh, a backup plan? Some kind of fling? I just shrugged. Whatever. We gotta go, congrats to you and your muse, have a great day. I turned and walked towards Mark. I could feel Liam's stare boring into my back. When I caught up to Mark, he asked, is that the same guy you called a demented idiot? I grinned, nudging him playfully. You always catch everything. Mark gave a small smile, not saying a word. Back at home, Mark sat quietly on the couch, and he looked so lonely. I went over and sat next to him. Were you jealous back at the grocery store? Mark smiled faintly, yeah. I laughed, really? You were jealous? He sighed, and put his hand on my head. Well, he was your boyfriend of 9 years, wasn't he? I think I get a little jealous. I laughed, so did it taste good? He grinned. It tasted sour. I wrapped my arms around him, burying my face in his chest. "Wanna try something sweet?" As I said that, I playfully poked him in the chest and asked, "I bet I'm pretty sweet, wanna try me?" He froze for a second and then quickly pushed me back on the couch, the air thick with tension. Mark's job was demanding. He sometimes even forgot to eat. I had a regular 9-to-5 job, so I had plenty of spare time. One night, I had an idea, and I decided to make Mark dinner. I knew he was going on a night shift at the hospital. I made him a nice soup and a couple of small dishes. By the time I got to the hospital, it was almost 9 p.m. I went into his department. He wasn't there, but I saw a lunchbox sitting on his desk. It was still warm. On it, there was a little sticky note. "Dr. Harrison, I made this for you with all my love. Hope you enjoy it. Love, your sweetie." It was so cheesy, I had to stifle a giggle. At the same time, I felt a twinge of annoyance. Just then, a nurse walked by the office and gave me a knowing look. She said, "You like Dr. Harrison too, huh? You know, I wouldn't bother bringing him food if I were you. He never eats other people's food. He usually gives the lunch boxes to us." Oh, okay, I'd been reading the wrong signals. I smiled and put the dinner on his desk. "It's okay. He might not eat others' food, but he'll eat mine." The nurse gave me a funny look. "All right then, suit yourself." When Mark returned from rounds, he saw me in his office. His face lit up. "Sarah? What are you doing here?" I patted the lunchbox on his desk and smiled. "I knew you were working a night shift, so I made some food for you." He grinned. "That's all it took, now I'm starving, even though I just ate dinner." He opened up the food, breathing in the aroma that smells great. But then his eye caught the sticky note on the other lunchbox and he stiffened. I just stared at him and said, "So, wanna explain this?" He said, "It's always the interns from other departments. They leave these all over my office when I'm not here." I raised an eyebrow. "So you just give away someone else's food, huh?" Mark said, "It's wasteful to throw away food. And whether someone else's feelings got hurt, not my problem." After that he took a few bites and a long sip of soup. Then his eyes went wide. "How did you know I gave away the other lunchbox?" Before I could reply, the same nurse from earlier walked into the office. She stopped in her tracks. I looked at her and smiled. "See, I told you he'd eat my food." Mark looked up at her. "Oh hey, this is my wife." The nurse looked totally shocked. "You're married?" He nodded and said, "Yeah, what's up?" as he continued to shovel in mouthfuls of food. She shook her head and said, "Patient in room 48 wants to see you." Mark nodded and said, "Okay, be right there." Mark ate another couple of bites and looked up at me. "Be back in a bit." He looked so cool, strutting down the hallway in his white coat. I got lost in thought. How had I not realized how handsome he was? But I waited and waited for him to come back. Instead, the nurse approached me. She smiled. "You should go home. There was an emergency, he had to leave with the ambulance." He was so busy, but I wasn't disappointed. I felt proud, being married to a man like him. Mark didn't hide his marriage at the hospital, but he also didn't walk around telling everyone he was hitched. So, on one of his days off, I dragged him to a jewelry store to get him a wedding band. Mark was always in surgery, so a ring wasn't practical. I had one simple request for him. I said, "I don't need you to wear the ring all the time, but for the next week, keep the ring in your pocket. Anytime one of those young nurses comes around, you gotta pull it out and wear it." Mark grinned. "Whatever you want." About 3 months later, after a particularly energetic night in the bedroom, my phone buzzed. I was out of breath, my cheeks flushed, as I picked up my phone. It was a text from a random number. "How have you been?" I knew instantly it was Liam. We'd been together for 9 years. We'd broken up several times, and I'd blocked his number, and he'd always find a way to reach out, begging me to take him back. My phone buzzed again and again. I think you're the one for me. I never should have broken up with you. Let's get back together, please? We were together 9 years, that's not something you can forget, right? Mark asked, why is your phone buzzing? I handed him my phone, take a look. He read through all of Liam's texts, and then he just smirked, saying nothing. I said, I'm going to block him. He said, don't. Put it on silent and let him text. If you block that number, he'll just get another one. The next morning, Mark was still sleeping next to me. I grabbed my phone and saw dozens of messages from Liam. But my eyes kept focusing on the last text. If you come back to me, I'll think about us getting married. Whatcha looking at? Mark mumbled, still half asleep. I handed him my phone, grinning, the idiot says he wants to get back together and he's thinking about marrying me. Are you worried? Mark grabbed my phone. He just typed one word, go away. I wrapped my arms around his neck and laughed, are you jealous? He smirked, not jealous, just regretful that I didn't marry you sooner. I snuggled up against his chest and whispered, it's not too late. But, not a lot of people know that we got married. Let's post it on social media, huh? Mark looked surprised, you actually want to let people know we're married? I said, why wouldn't I? His eyes lit up, and he wrapped me up in a tight hug. Turns out I've been worrying over nothing. You're amazing. A minute later, I posted on Instagram. Mr. Harrison, let's do this thing for life. I attached the selfie of us holding our marriage licenses. Within minutes, a mutual friend called me. As soon as I picked up, Liam's voice, full of despair, came over the line. Is that photo on your account fake? Are you just trying to hurt me? I actually laughed. Can you fake a marriage license with the City Hall seal? Try to do it and show me. Liam was desperate, we ran into each other at the grocery store, and he wasn't even your boyfriend then. I said, who told you we weren't together then? My husband proposed the night we broke up. We got our license the next day. When I was dating Liam, I thought he was so great. Now, I could only describe him as a loser. And then there was Mark. Even with bedhead, he still managed to be hot. Ugh, I had been totally blind before. Mark wrapped his arms around me. He whispered in my ear, say husband again. My cheeks turned red. I'm still on the phone. Mark smirked and tightened his grip, I don't care, tell me again. Liam must have heard him on the other end. He immediately hung up the phone. I hung up and Mark pushed me onto the bed, his eyes full of mischief, say it. I bit my lip, feeling shy, I had never called him husband before. It was more something I said to get back at Liam. He narrowed his eyes, smiling. If you don't, I'll have to make you. I reached up to him and said it, flustered and red-faced. Husband, my amazing husband. The best husband in the whole wide world. Mark was easy to manipulate. All it took was a little bit of flirting. I had to admit, that was something I'd lost when I was with Liam. That on-again off-again relationship had left me drained. I realized that since I married Mark, I was myself again, happy and hopeful about the future. Someone once said, you gotta kiss a few frogs to find your prince. I kissed one, and now I knew what a real relationship looked like. Of course, Liam didn't know when to quit. Even after learning that I was married, he still tried to get back with me, and he was waiting for me at my work. He called and said, I'm downstairs. Come on down, we need to talk. I just rolled my eyes, I don't wanna see you. He said, I'm just gonna come up. I sighed, fine. Wait for me downstairs. As soon as I stepped outside, I saw Liam, holding a bouquet of roses. He smiled and handed them to me. For you. I crossed my arms and looked him straight in the eye. Liam, just leave me alone. He got all worked up. We just broke up. It's happened before. What was the need to get married just to hurt me? I laughed. So, if we got back together, and I actually married you, then what? That wouldn't be a joke anymore? Liam's face twisted in confusion. What's that supposed to mean? We've been together for 9 years, was that just a joke for you? If I didn't care about you, do you really think I'd have stuck around that long? I just looked at him with pity. Don't try to paint yourself as some hero. She's your muse, right? So you get to fulfill all your fantasies. What are you doing here? You're just making a fool of yourself. Liam's face went red. I glanced up at the sky, full of dark clouds. It's going to rain. You should go. And seriously, leave me alone. I just want peace with my husband. He said, I'm not leaving until you take the flowers. I really had spoiled him for so many years. I sighed, whatever. I gotta get back to work. That evening, the storm hit. I was focused at work, so I didn't think about Liam. As I was about to leave, Mark called, it's pouring out here, I'm going to come pick you up. I asked, aren't you working a night shift? He laughed, I traded shifts with someone. After I hung up, some of my coworkers were gossiping. There was some loser downstairs in the rain with roses. He got all soaked, until security kicked him out. I just shrugged it off. Mark pulled up to the curb. He saw me step outside and jumped out, holding an umbrella. My heart started pounding. I remembered last year, there was a similar storm. Liam had been out drinking with friends. He had me go get him. I had trouble getting a ride, and I had to stand in the rain to wait for a car. I got completely soaked. When I got to him, he had no thanks for me. He just said, took you long enough. I was wet and miserable, but I knew I had to give him face in front of his friends. I kept all my emotions bottled up inside. Mark gave me the umbrella. Here, you take it. I reached for the umbrella, and he put his coat over my shoulders. It's cold, don't want you to catch a cold. He picked up the umbrella again, and held it over us. I stared at him. That warm feeling inside was the feeling of being cared for. Later that night, as Mark held me in his arms, my breath was catching in my chest. I think I'm starting to like you more and more. He raised an eyebrow and wrapped me in an even tighter hug. Just like? That's not enough. I buried my face into his chest, feeling his breathing. Do you like me? He didn't say anything for a moment, and then he reached out and pinched my cheek. For the sake of fairness, I'm not gonna tell you. When you're head over heels in love with me, I'll let you know. I frowned, then I bit him on his chest, leaving 2 little teeth marks. He laughed and hugged me again. His eyes were full of affection. 2 days later, I got a call. It was Liam's friend. He said, Sarah, could you please check on Liam? He's been running a fever. When he's delirious, he keeps saying your name. I frowned, he's sick? Tell him to go to the doctor. I'm not medicine. He sighed, you guys were together for so long. Can you really just let him go? I never considered it before, because I had already let Liam go. I took a moment and said calmly, during all those years, he wasn't around when I needed him. I can't love someone if I can't count on him. I would have left him even if he hadn't cheated on me. I hung up and Liam called again. His voice was raspy. He said, I'm sick, can't you be nice? Why are you being so mean? I frowned. After everything, he thought he had another chance? He said, I promise I'll never cheat again. I only want you. Break it off with that rebound guy and come back to me. What the heck? A rebound? Mark was never a rebound. He had always been a kind, supportive, and loving friend. And now he was my husband. I said, we should meet when you're feeling better. He said, no, let's meet today. We met at a coffee shop. He was there early and had ordered my usual Americano. I sat down and smiled. Let's get this all cleared up today. His eyes flickered. He forced a smile. Have you moved? I went to your old place. The new tenants opened the door. I nodded, yeah. I moved in with my husband. Liam panicked and took a sip of his drink. It's okay, we can start over. I looked him straight in the eyes. Liam, listen. Getting married was not an impulsive thing. I wanted to get married for a long time. Liam got defensive. So you're okay with marrying just anyone? Before today, I wasn't even sure of that. I looked him in the eyes. We were together for 9 years, Liam. Remember the time I twisted my ankle at the mall? I called you to pick me up. You'd said you were tired, so I had to limp out by myself to find a ride home. I continued, and when I had appendicitis, Mom came to stay with me. You'd visit for like an hour and then disappear on the weekends. You'd stay home to sleep and play video games instead of being with me. I used to cry when I thought about those moments. But now I felt nothing. I continued, I could always handle those things. But last year, when my mom got sick, where were you? I had no idea what to do. I needed you, and you were never there. He quickly said, I was out of town. You know that. I couldn't come back. I laughed, yeah, you couldn't come back. But you came back a few times for work. You were so busy, but not busy enough to go to the hospital. You lied to me. Liam just looked down. I had let Liam go because I had always hoped he'd be there for me. I was just tired of being disappointed. At the start of the year, I was always pestering Liam about getting married. I wanted to settle down because of my age and my mom's health. And he was my boyfriend. That's who you get married to. I was lucky he said no. I still felt sad when I thought of how I had felt when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. I sniffled. I smiled through tears and said, when I had nobody, Mark was there for me. He got me the best specialists. He went to see my mom whenever he could. He was always there to make me laugh and feel better. Liam squeezed his hands into fists and hissed, he took advantage of you. I laughed, maybe he did. But you gave him that opening. If you had been there for me, none of this would have happened. You always put me last, or maybe I wasn't even in your plans. He'd had no problem falling in love with someone else, cheating and breaking up with me, or assuming I'd come crawling back when he got bored with his new girl. I had learned that love comes in many forms. You can lose yourself, or you can be a better person because of it. As I got up to leave, I said, nobody is going to wait forever in vain. And if I hadn't met Mark, I would never have known what it feels like to be happy in a relationship. But I did, and I'm so glad I did. After I left the coffee shop, I called Mark. It rang, but he didn't pick up. He once told me he kept his phone in the break room while he was in surgery, but he never turned it off, so he would never miss an emergency. But today, he didn't call back all day. I had never missed anyone like this before. Even though he wasn't there, and I kept waiting for his call, I didn't feel sad. I knew he was doing what he needed to do, and he had given me a sense of security without even saying a word. I smiled. Busy day? I said, my voice still sleepy. There was a big pileup on the East Side overpass. 3 critical injuries. But we got them all stabilized, he said. I could hear him breathing heavily. He just came out of the operating room and was calling me. He said, so, what's up? Did you need me for anything? I took a breath, nah, just wanted to say, I love you. He paused, do you know how good that makes me feel? I feel like I could take on the world. I didn't get it at first. But I later learned that he had been in surgery for 11 hours. 11 hours without food, just some sugary drinks. He came out exhausted, and his first thought was to call me back. A few days later, I got a text from Liam. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I read it, and then I deleted his number. I knew he wouldn't reach out again. 3 months after our license, Mark gave me a proper wedding. That night, I was with him, curled up in his arms. His breathing was warm against my ear. He said that his biggest regret was not telling me how he felt in high school, but then I started dating Liam, and it seemed impossible. He had dated people, he had loved people, but eventually he circled back. He said he never would have guessed that he'd have another chance with me. He said, I never thought I'd marry you, and now I have you in my arms for the rest of our lives.